Today, we'll talk about winning trades, break-even trades, and the losing trades. I'll cover some of my recent trades from the last week. We'll talk about everything: stop-loss hunts, liquidity pools, smart money concepts, order blocks. Everybody talks about trading strategies, but nobody talks about how to be a better trader. Today will be the day you'll learn how to use Power of 3, liquidity, and the order blocks. We have so much to cover. If you're ready, let's start. Welcome our free trading course. We only talk about price action trading strategies and smart money concepts. With this video, you'll learn how to become winner trader from a losing trader. If you are looking for a structured table of contents, I set it up for you. You can find it on Google Drive or directly from my website, which is in the description. It is important to watch videos in order to fully understand everything. Okay, people, let's talk about some winners, some losers, and some break-even trades. Last week, I was waiting for this classic setup around the New York session. I tweeted about it, but the price never reached equal highs and the imbalance. Instead, it fell sharply. As I said on Twitter, the entry is gone. However, this entry now turned into a target. Let's talk about it on real charts. I will focus on micro scalping and the New York session trading. As you can see in this 5-minute time frame, there is a very clear equal lows below. This was my initial target. Once the liquidity hunted above, as the swing failure pattern, I noticed this giant imbalance here. And right below it, there was this great equal highs. It also intersects with the London high. What a great entry point, right? Amazing. However, it did not happen. There is no rule that says that perfect setups will work. Since it cleared my equal lows below, this entry has become a target for me. Let's see what happened afterward. Once the New York stock market opened, there was this very little tiny sweep-like movement, which also looked like perfect equal lows at the same time, which tricked many people to long here. If you just zoom out and look at the chart, you'll notice this special low on the left. This was actually the previous day low, PDL, and creating this giant equal lows from a wider perspective. Once that all that massive equal lows hunted with previous day low, we got all the fuel we needed. Look at the liquidity sweep and the reaction that causes the market structure to break. Now, what do we have here? Perfect target above, massive liquidity hunted below, prices impulsive, so powerful, magnetically pulled up. After this massive imbalance tap, I did not have much time to set limit orders. I instantly used the market order to grab the move as much as I could. If the moves are so powerful in micro time frames, you will not have much time to set limit orders. You should join the rally. Let's do something with you. Imagine you open the chart and looking at the recent price movements, and you notice this imbalance and the order block. And notice this order block and imbalance caused a great reaction. It also swept the liquidity. Now you have cause and fuel here. Around the New York opening, let's see what is happening. Another imbalance, another order block, a nice liquidity sweep. Did you notice what happened here? 100% the exact same movement. Guys, these are very repetitive patterns and keeps happening millions of times. So, we have 2 times order blocks, 2 times imbalances, 2 times liquidity sweeps. Now, after the New York opening, notice this parabolic liquidity waiting above. Now, this is a very weak market structure break that I do not enjoy a lot. Right, Why would you risk your money here then? Because this setup has so much meaning. Price extremely filled up. Price have a very clear target. You do not have to risk 1 hour. Any professional trader here would risk at least 0.5 hour to gain some cash. Okay, let's talk about a break-even trade, or we can say a very small loss. Why did I take this trade? First of all, in this trade context, there is a very clear equal high above, which collides with the London high. We also had a very clear 2-minute imbalance. I also confirmed the fill, an equal low swept, imbalance filled, and the previous day low swept. This was a perfect trade. Perfect setup, perfect entry, perfect target. But even the perfect can fail. First of all, I like quick movements. But this trade took way longer than my regular trades. This is a big warning. This was the last demand area which I wanted the price to hold. Once this demand area failed, I lost hope for this setup. And I decided to enter trade with a very small loss, almost break even. Remember, if you started to get signals that your trade setup is failing, it is wise to close the trade early and save your money. I noticed on Twitter that some people make very serious mistakes, especially about the power of 3 and liquidity. I saw that some people try to trade PO3 like this and fail. Can you notice the mistake here? Yes, the liquidity already swept here. The target is closed. Remember what I always say. No target means no trade. Let's check the right way of trading. Now, you notice that there is a great open liquidity above. The key is it is open, not swept. Then you are waiting for the proper liquidity sweep and possible demand area like an imbalance. This is how you trade. This is how you build a trade setup. Be very careful about when you build trading setups. Now, I noticed that some people try to long here as a power of 3 setup. First of all, notice the strong supplies above, the imbalance and the order block. And the liquidity swept right around this great supply. So this was a bearish power of 3, not a bullish power of 3. The trade has already played out. I hope that I made everything very clear. I suggest you watch this video a couple of times. I gave you free gems that you cannot find easily on the net. Okay folks, this is it. This is how you fix your mistakes and move on. These are great trading strategies for scalpers and day traders. I hope you subscribe to the channel and like the video. Thank you, please take care and see you soon.